Welcome back, everybody. We shall continue with our session on technologies for the future. Uh, Now, I invite the session chair, Dr. Siddharth Junjunwala, to the stage, longevity investigator and associate professor, Department of Bioengineering at Indian Institute of Science.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We'll get the session started just because we're running a little late. We don't want to delay any further. So, without much ado, I'd like to invite Dr. Shriram Nene. I don't think he needs an introduction, but nevertheless, few words. He's a distinguished healthcare professional and founder of Pathfinder Health Sciences, an organization dedicated to advancing medical technology and healthcare solutions. Dr. Nene is deeply committed to bridging the gap between healthcare and technology with a focus to enhance the efficiency, accessibility of healthcare services worldwide. Dr. Nene, over to you.
Okay. Thank you so much for having me here. And it's an honor. Deepak, when he invited me, said, hey, you want to come for a longevity conference? And Vishal was like, you have to be here. I said, of course. I'm always there for you guys because I believe in what we're working on, and I believe in every single one of you. I've enjoyed the talks today, and I look forward to bridging the gap. So here's my first slide, to infinity and beyond, because longevity is about counting and continuing to count. And really, our focus is simple. Can I get you to 100 years and beyond with me, but not just 100 years, but 100 good years? Can you hit play? Can someone hit play on the video? Because it's the time you have on the earth. You have so many heartbeats, so many seconds, so many years. And some of that is dictated by your DNA and by your habits. But the truth is, we think now we've gotten into anti-aging and gotten into a huge industry which could amount to $93 billion. But let's take a step back. 500, 600 years ago, Ponce de Leon looked for the fountain of youth. What if that fountain of youth was already available to you in the way you take care of yourself, in your habits, in your lifestyles, in some of the things you do? And what if mechanistically we start to understand what parts of your cellular machinery and DNA are affected? There's something called a epigenetic clock. And what they're finding is, you can see how fast you're aging. There may be ways to reverse it. Now the question is, would you want that? So from the time we're born, at least for now, there's a time we're going to pass. And that's dictated by a combination of your genes and your lifestyles and your exposure. I'm sure you guys have caught the recent series called The Blue Zone on Netflix. And that's been an excellent kind of exploration of what different societies do and what is peculiar about them. Like take the Japanese with caloric restriction. The idea is that you eat to 80% of full. In a number of animal experiments, when animals were placed into quote-unquote starvation states, the body mechanistically slowed down metabolism. So the concept of longevity, right? From the day you're born, you begin dying. Imagine, right? If anyone told you that. And here's the other kicker, that all the pediatricians take the baby from the obstetricians and they slap it on the butt, and there's no manual, right? They're just trying to get the baby to breathe and live. But the truth is, everyone's manual is different. And so the concept of longevity is simple, that at some point in your life, you will die. And whether that's on a cellular level with apoptosis or on a global level with systemic degradation, these are the processes which will cause us to succumb. The idea is to maximize health span, which is defined as your usable years, and not lifespan. And hopefully both of these will come together and become one. And then secondly, what is the science fact and what is the fiction? Because these days I'm hearing a lot of things about what's going on without any clarity on what the truth is. What we need to focus on is, rather than acute care, prevention, early detection, and early treatment, which considers personalized precision healthcare, which I think in the last 2 days everyone is talking about. Along those lines, a little bit about myself. I'm a first-generation immigrant to the US. My folks immigrated out of India to London in '63, and then we were born and moved to the US in '73. It was the standard Indian formula, right? I grew up there and I wanted to do business and technology, and my parents said, no, you must do engineering or become a doctor, right? So I became a doctor dutifully, but the idea was, what could I do more? And I became a heart surgeon, and for 20 years, I was in the trenches practicing, and I did about 10,000 cases, open hearts, vascular surgery, aortas, robotic surgery. I was board certified in 3 disciplines and practiced in the US. But what it came down to was this, that at best, I could do 350 to 500 cases in a year, about 2 to 3 a day. And then when you count vacations, a total of maybe 500 cases and another 2,000 consults. When you look on the planet, there's only about 7 billion people back in 2011 when I considered this equation, and now 8 billion people. And so what I said is, maybe we could do more. And using my background, the thought was to democratize healthcare by using a combination of media, tech, and smart services. And so along the way, we created a film company, which produced its first film, sold it to Netflix, and the second film went to the theaters and is now going to DTH. We created a edutech, which scaled, got profitable, and then got an exit offer in 2020 during the pandemic. And then we, in stealth, created Pathfinder, which is a product which has media, tech, and smart services, which scale it. But my board said, do more. Go to 50,000 feet and become a family office and an investor. So along the way, for the last 5 years, we've been investing in other startups, all in the healthcare space, media, technology, and financial services. But what we created was something to get the word out. Because what I saw during the pandemic was very distressing, that anyone and their brother could get up and say something about healthcare without evidence, without any type of reality. And so we created websites, we created instruction, we did a few other things. And this was part of our efforts. But the idea is simple, and this is kind of a curation. What was the thing which drove me? And what made it interesting? About a year ago, as I'm building these protocols and platforms to try to get people healthy, I went in for my yearly physical. Now, if you're a healthcare provider, you know that you put yourself last. And you know, it's the excellent example that when you're on a plane, the first thing the air hostess says is that if that plane's crashing, you take that oxygen mask and put it on yourself first before you put it on everyone else. What do? Most of the people in this room, the opposite. We basically put it on our friends, our family, and more than that, everyone else in the room before we even think about ourselves. So here I am doing my so-called executive physical. And by the way, I hate these tests because they just throw a fishing expedition at you looking for disease. And some of the people have talked about this, that that's not the right approach. Where I grew up and what I learned was that there's a Boise's funnel where 80% of your diagnoses are made with the history and physical. Now come to India and other parts of the world where we don't have enough physicians. 1 million doctors taking care of 1.412 billion patients, and not one India, but 70% rural, 30% metro, constituting 28 states and 8 union territories. Back to the chase, what we found was appalling, and I'm the first to be ashamed about it, so don't hit me too hard on this, but my LFTs were up, suggesting on ultrasound a grade 2 fatty liver disease. My cholesterol was at 261, my LDL was at 169. So we knew genetically that my mom had high cholesterol, but we'd never had any events in the immediate family. We did in secondary family. Why is that important? Because your risk factors manage your disease and they make it a predictable instance if you're not careful. Secondly, my hemoglobin A1C had tracked up to 5.8. And if you know about hemoglobin A1C, it measures 3 months of good living. And the bottom line is that if it's above 5.8, you are pre-diabetic, and at 6.3 to 6.5, you become diabetic if your sugars are high too. And so here I was on the cusp, a so-called healthcare influencer and healthcare innovator being called out for being unhealthy. My mom would have said, "You're healthy, why are you worried?" You know, and I was really healthy if you see the pictures. But the bottom line is I wasn't healthy. So at that point, we said, what do we do different? Because I had used this platform and the protocol and many people in stealth testing it, including my father, who had been a diabetic for almost 55 years. He was 80 at the time. We put him on protocol, and we changed everything around for him. And it's a 360-degree holistic approach to health where you look at not just the labs, but you're looking at lifestyles. And I teach more life than I do health. What we did first was we changed one of 5 things. The diet, which we've talked about, is a huge measure, and we'll talk about why later. I think Dr. Sen spoke to this very clearly, that if you have metabolic syndrome, that your risk of having secondary diseases is exceptionally high. Well, fast forward to India now, where we've gone from an agrarian agricultural uh, economy to a technological economy where people were in the last generation tilling in the fields and now working in the BPO centers and in technology and other things, not needing the calories that they're consuming, and as a result end up either moderately or morbidly obese, and in addition to that, get into trouble with other things. But what we did first was we adopted a low-carb, high-protein lifestyle. And you'll see why all of this is important. I'm gonna bring it together and use my personal example at the expense of opening myself up to vulnerability, because you're gonna say, well, how could you let this happen? But anyway, we lost about 8 kilos. The second thing we did was we brought in a transformation team in our platform, and they are renowned for doing these Bollywood transformations. So if you've ever seen John Abraham, you've seen any of these guys get ripped up for the screen, they do it. And the only comment I would make with these guys is they don't always use the scientific evidence. That's where I came in. But they do a very credible job of making these guys look good, right? And what we did is we went on a structured diet. So they dialed me into a BMR, a basal metabolic rate. So if you're familiar with healthcare, a basal metabolic rate is what you need minimum for your organs to function, right? And for a 70-kilo man, you need 2,000 calories to maintain your body weight. In a BMR diet, you're at 1,500 calories. Added to that, I was on 9 workouts a week now. And I've always been a sports guy, but let's face it, after getting married, having jobs, working, doing everything else, you don't play as much tennis, you don't run, you don't do everything on a consistent basis. But in this case, I was working 3 spin, 1-hour exercise routines a week, 3 strength routines, and then 3 aerobic routines to bridge the gap. So about 9 workouts. So I was dialing in about 500 to 600 calories. So my net calories were about 900 to 1,000 calories per day, half of what you need to maintain your weight. So now you're asking, well, doc, why aren't you hungry? In addition to the caloric deficit, strength, and aerobic workouts, we added GLP-1s. Why GLP-1s and GIRPs? Because the problem is I have a family history of diabetes, and my hemoglobin A1C had gone to 5.8. And I'll be honest with you, first 2 months I fought this. I'm like, this is the Hollywood, Bollywood drug that everyone's looking for the holy grail to get skinny and just show them the muscles and the guns and all that. But the truth is the data on these is compelling. And now out to 4 years and longer, they found that there's a significant decrease in cardiovascular events, as well as in renal failure in diabetics. And it's more working on an inflammatory basis. So it may be an actual adjunct to our longevity holy grail that we didn't even know. And these aren't new. They've been around for about 10 years treating diabetes. But the adjunct to that, if you're not familiar with the GLP-1s, which are Ozempic, Wegovy, and Mounjaro, is they actually act to drop weight. And in the case of many of these, you have a significant 10 to 25% weight loss with them, depending on the patient. There are side effects to them, and so I always tell people you never take these without a doctor being involved, because it can be significant, and they're not for all patients. I would not do this just for vanity. It's something you do when you're in trouble, and I would use normal adjuvants with diet and exercise and all of this other stuff. At the same time, I threw a curveball at my team. The first one was a curveball, the second one not so much. I went to a full vegan diet. Why vegan? I'm already lactose intolerant, so I never consume dairy products. The second was I'm part of PETA and I'm an animal advocate, so I don't necessarily enjoy the cruelty that's perpetrated on animals during animal agriculture. The third is from a sustainability standpoint, animal agriculture is creating CO2, methane, and using up scores of land and water, and it really is not good for our environment or our future, whereas plants are basically creating oxygen. And then the last thing, most importantly, is from a healthcare standpoint, vegan diets have been shown to improve longevity. It's not 100%, but the data is fairly compelling. More importantly, plant fats versus animal fats, it's almost a no-brainer. And so I had gone from being a omnivore or carnivore, which interestingly in my previous generation, I come from a very devout Kokonista Brahmin family from Maharashtra, they were all vegetarians and vegans. And we, when we moved to the US, didn't really have options initially in the 70s and 60s. And so we kind of went the opposite direction. Now I'm back in India, living since 2011, and guess what? I'm a vegan. So it kind of comes full circle. Uh, and then at the same time, I stopped drinking completely. And I wasn't drinking a lot, but here's the other aside that in India, I think they drink more than anywhere I've seen on the planet. I think India consumes more Johnny Walker on the planet than anywhere on the planet. And the interesting part is it isn't about the drinking, it's what comes after that. And so the bottom line is that you end up becoming a binge eater when you drink. And so I stopped that. The outcome was that I dropped 20 kilos over the last year. I went from like 90.15 to latest is 69.7. More importantly than the weight, because at some point the weight doesn't matter. The fat content went from about 29% down to about 15.2%. And compounding that, my hemoglobin A1C is down to 5. My cholesterol on just as ezetimibe is down to 152. My LDLs are below 90, and my LFTs are normal now. And so clearly a combination of these worked. Now, these are the data, and I'm not going to go through this again because someone already has, but across species, caloric deficit has been shown to have a beneficial effect on longevity as well as on other things. It's not completely borne out with humans, but we are thinking with the experiments and kind of the observations on Okinawa and in the blue zones and other places that it works. Then the other points which I've already drawn out are that the caloric restrictions shown, the GLP agonists we've already talked about, and then exercise, which is kind of a miracle drug if you think about it, in that it improves your overall outcome by improving your muscle mass, insulin sensitivity, even your mental health with endorphin rushes and whatnot. What are the takeaways and what are the visions of what we're talking about? And I've kept this short and sweet. You can go on my website, drnene.com, or on my YouTube channel, or on Instagram and see all of this. We have about 475 videos, and the project was done to educate and enhance because what we thought is there's a lack of awareness, lack of access to world-class evidence-based international standards. We have all of the links and references from NIH and LBMI. But the first is monitoring and feedback loops are critical. The second, and I'm sorry about the numbers, becoming a patient helped me refine my own product. The third was we need scalable solutions for preventative, personalized care. And then the last is to infinity and beyond with all of you. Because the idea is don't stop counting. You don't know when it ends. The bottom line is you know where it starts with one step. Thank you for your attention. I'll open up to questions.
Thank you. That was a fantastic talk. We're open to questions. Yes, up there.
Hi, Dr. Nene. Thank you for the presentation. My question is that the research on aging has been going on for such a long time. We also saw that tech companies like Project Serotonin also has been in development for the last 10 years. But then the awareness, which you talked about, that anyone can go out and start talking about longevity, that was the whole issue. So the awareness is still low. But in your case, you are a doctor by background, but then you are also a celebrity. Outside the community of doctors, a lot of other people also know you. So when you have tested all these things on yourself and when you go out and talk about it, people get that kind of trust. They are more aware of it. So do you think that this is something that is required where the doctor need to go out, get that celebrity status and then also talk about longevity so that awareness can increase? Do you think that has relevance?
So I'll put the question out to you guys. I mean, look, I treated my patients like family. It was not a mental equation in my business office because I didn't know if they had insurance or not. And the way I looked at it is you should treat them the same way you do your own family. By being vulnerable today, I've exposed myself. But at the same time, what I've said is I practice what I preach. Because oftentimes, as medical experts, we are the worst offenders because we don't have time. My comment to you, and to answer your question short and sweet, is that I think you should use every weapon in your arsenal to forward the doctrine, because it's very clear to me what needs to be done. And you know, Pathfinder is always about media, tech, and smart cities. The media takes care of entertaining and educating. The technology is a cloud-based CMR with AI, which uses these feedback loops. And to be honest, we're a platform play, so I can incorporate any one of your things, and we invest in people. And the last is organizing the space around us, meaning the other startups and other established medical groups, to give best-in-class service. Because my, number one shareholder is the patient. Always will be. There should be no conflict.
Next question up.
Hi, here.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm Lavanya. I'm a clinical and a functional nutritionist, and I'm also pursuing longevity master's executive. And I have one suggestion. So, your earlier slide, which says calorie deficit, right? Does it work for you?
So the idea was to balance the weight with the decrease, right? And the only way we could do that was having less on board than actually doing that. We always, then the part I didn't put in there is we always made sure the macros and the micros were taken care of.
Yes.
And we always made sure it was a balanced diet. It's
Yeah.
just the caloric deficit.
Yeah, my suggestion is
We can discuss that
please,
later.
Is there a
please change
question?
that particular word to calorie deficit and a balanced diet. It's more good for.
Thank you. One final quick question there.
Sir, what is the critical age in Indian scenario based on diet and environment beyond which we need to take care of the health? What is the critical range of health?
It's a great question. So let's talk about India. Median life expectancy is 69. We're 10 years less than the West. Our median age, by comparison, is 28. And 2/3 of our population is below 35. My view would be this, and why I moved back to India with all of this background was because we could create huge impact by starting early and often. I say, number one, you need to train kids from the word go about how to eat and what's beneficial. And culturally, it really depends, because you go 5 miles north, south, east, west, 5 kilometers north, south, east, west, diets, religions, languages, food patterns all change, as well as the harvests change, right? So I think we need to engineer it by satisfying the dietary prescriptions based on your genetics, your medical history, your family history, your social history. Like for me, I have lactose intolerance, I can't do milk, right? Or I can't do dairy products. And then the second thing is we need to then gauge it by your age as you move forward and base it on consumption. Because if you're 5 or 10 or 20, your consumption, your activity is going to be much higher than if you're turning 30, 40, and 50. And then in women in particular, their hormonal changes and their hormonal environment will change, and their BMR, the basal metabolic rate, will actually go down. And so we need to adapt dynamically along the way. And we're getting better and better tools to do that with sensors and other things. So I think all of that needs to be adapted and continuously monitored so that your diet matches what your needs are.
Thank you, Dr. Nene. We'll appreciate other questions later. Thank you very much for your talk and time.